Hey folks, welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Today I'm going to talk about pressing on, getting over some adversity, and we're going to plant some daikon radishes and take a look around at some of the, well, what's left of the garden. So stick around. In my last video, we sowed some cabbages and some cauliflower straight through that weed barrier cloth. I'm using that weed barrier cloth this year during the winter time because I've had a real trouble. I've had a season of weeds, nutsedge in particular. And so my son and I have gone through here over the course of many days and dug that stuff out by hand. And well, now we can plant in it. But that delayed us. So I'm behind here in Zone 9A. And if you've been watching my fall gardening videos, really what we're planting here is a winter garden. Well, daikon radishes grow quite well in the winter, and I've selected varieties from Kitazawa Seed Company that seem to meet my needs. I'm going to plant them further apart than necessary. This soil in my raised bed has been here for going on its 8th year, and I filled this raised bed with the typical raised bed mix that I had trucked in from a dirt yard. But over the years, with the growth and with gardening and sometimes tilling, sometimes turning, I've pulled up a lot of clay. Clay is in my native soil here. I've got a real tough clay called black gumbo clay, and it's made its way into my garden beds over the years. It's fertile stuff if you can break it up, and you can break it up with gypsum, you can break it up with more organic material. But as I mentioned, I don't have a lot of compost this year to put on my garden, so I'm dealing with the latent nutrition left over from my growing season for spring and fall. I did put a lot of compost in here in the spring, and we should be pretty fertile. It's good soil. But what I want from those daikon radishes is I'd like them to go down through this top 8 to 10 inches of good soil into the clay down below and start punching holes in that clay so that we can harvest some of the mineralization down in that clay. And daikons are pretty good at busting up clay. I'm not sure that we're going to actually reach down that far, because all this nice soil on here might encourage those daikons just to stay up here, and rather than growing downward, they might bulk up and kind of rise up out of the ground a little more than I want them to. But we're going to try. And you can't go wrong with daikon radishes. Man, we can make some kimchi, we can pickle some of them, and yeah, I just like the idea of growing these. In hoping that these radishes will punch down into that highly mineralized black gumbo clay, the benefit of getting down into that stuff, not only just punching some holes in it and breaking it up, but those radishes send out these fibrous hair-like roots, and they'll go out into that clay and mine it for all those resources. And that brings it up, and it stores it in the radish, meaning we've got mineral-rich radishes to eat. But the greens on top, if we compost that, we're taking the minerals that are currently down below our garden bed and hopefully being accessed by these deep penetrating roots. And we're storing those minerals in the leaves, and we can put that in our compost and cycle it through our garden again. So it's a good way to add mineralization to your soil, is to plant things that get down below where you normally grow and get into that mineral-rich clay. So that's the hope here, is that we get some clay broken up. There is a method that people use here to punch holes through this weed cloth using a weed torch. Get that ring of that weed torch real hot. Yeah. Cut your flame out and just touch it on here. I'm out of propane, and you got to get stuff done. So, well, one thing I can tell you is that this weed cloth really dulls a knife quick. So I've had to go in and put an edge on there, and I'll complete my holes on the other side now. Yeah, that stuff, tough stuff. Okay, the seed packet gives us a lot of information. These will germinate anywhere between 55 and 70 degrees. And that's good, because we're about to have a bit of a cold snap sweep through this week, cold for here, in which we'll be down in those 55s. Right now it's like 80 degrees, 85 degrees. There'll be plenty of warmth for these to germinate. So what I'm going to do is plant them at a 1/2 inch seed depth. I'm just going to come in here and remove some of the coarser material and make a little 1/2 inch hole. We're going to be planting these alpine golds on this side, And on this side, we're going to plant a different variety. I have 4 or 5 different varieties. If I can get into the packet, we'll be planting. Now, these are pretty large seeds. I'm going to plant 2 of them in each hole, and I'm going to thin them out, just come and cut the one we don't need. Cut it right out of there. So there we go, we have our first daikon radish. So what we'll do is just put 2 seeds in each hole, cover them over with soil. Real easy. I never cease to be amazed when I plant seeds that they actually come up. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just an amazing thing to me that seeds, this tiny little seed, comes up. And that's why I do the single seed challenge each year. That's why we came up with that, so that we could appreciate the potential of a seed. Now, if these get very large, much larger than these holes, I'll have to come and just kind of cut an X out so that the radish itself can bulk up, and we won't be pushing too much of this weed cloth around. It won't be fighting against it, is what I'm trying to say. All right. I'm going to be planting this fall storage variety. That's our next variety we're going to sow. So I'll get a few seeds here. I'm also going to try something with these holes filled with weeds. I'm going to just drop a few seeds in some of those holes and see if they'll just grow there. Wouldn't that be bonus food? All right, 2 seeds per hole. All right, we've got 20 different plots here, spots here of daikon radish, 2 different varieties, and now we water them in. I've tried to avoid planting brassicas and radishes and that kind of stuff where I had the same kind of crop last year, because I've seen what happens when you plant too much of the crop in the same place over the course of a couple of years. You build up pests in the soil, especially with squash plants. You get those vine borers, and I've dug out a whole bunch of vine borer pupa as we were digging out nut grass. So I'm trying to pay a little more attention to that so that we can minimize our troubles. All right. I want to talk about what's going on in my garden after an unusual year. In February, we had the hardest freeze that this region has experienced in decades, and it really stunted a lot of my fig trees. It killed them all the way back, most of them all the way back to the root, to the ground level. So I didn't get any good fig trees this year. My fig trees were more concentrating on growing and growing back. Same thing with my citrus. All my potted citrus that I could take indoors, I did take it indoors, but I only have limited room, so I couldn't take all the figs in there. I took a few of the figs that I liked the best. I took them indoors, and they weathered the storm with me indoors. My lemon tree, my Meyer lemon tree, died back all the way to the main trunk, and Lucy over there looked pathetic. Even though she had been covered and had heat source and everything, that storm was just too much for citrus in our area that's in the ground, and a lot of people lost their citrus. Fortunately, Lucy has come back from above the graft union, and we've got a plant that is enormous, and I'm really happy about that. We're not going to get any fruit this year. Obviously, citrus needs a couple years of growth, at least one, before it's going to put out fruit. My apple trees, I planted them after the freeze. They're doing just fine. But everything that was out here was really affected by that freeze, and I don't have any real scientific data to show a correlation between the freeze and all the other bad stuff that happened this year. But I think there's a correlation. Maybe you know about these kinds of things. But what happened, we have had more pestilence and pest pressure this spring, and mainly late spring and this summer, than I've ever seen. We had tons and tons of pests, and they really knocked back the garden a bit here and there. I had my first infestation of army worms. I had more hornworms than I've ever seen this year. I had a new pest called the grape leaf skeletonizer, and it came and attacked my muscadines. I was able to head them off before they did so much damage that the plants wouldn't ripen their fruit. And we just treated those with some BT. That killed them right away. But yeah, so we've had a rough year. And also we've had more weeds this year than we've ever had in the past. especially like I was mentioning, the nutsedge, and we've had to go and dig that nutsedge out. It also seems like things are growing longer into the season this year. It's November and my sweet potatoes still have not stopped flowering, although I suspect that's coming very soon. I have harvested some sweet potatoes out of containers, but the ones that are in the ground in my garden bed, well, they're holding me up, man. I need that ground, but they're not ready to put on tubers. I think the sweet potatoes are more important than whatever else I'm going to grow there. I can get a nice bulk harvest of sweet potatoes. They store for a long time. They're good calories to have in the ground, so I'm going to leave them there for now. I did plant some garlic here. Moving ahead, I'm looking forward to next spring. Hopefully next spring won't be as pestilence prone as this past spring was. And I look forward to growing getting some garlic here for the first time. And I look forward to pruning up all my fig trees to better shape again so they don't look so ragged, and training the new growth that's come up to fruiting shape. So that's going to be coming up. But wow, man, what a year we've had. And it's still weird. It's November and it's warm out here, but it's cool at night, and we've got cold fronts rolling in on a regular basis now. So I'm a month late because of all those problems from last year. I'm a month late getting my fall garden started. I want to usually start my fall gardening on October the 1st or that week. Well, it's November the 1st. So I've begun planting, but I'm still not ready to finish up planting. So we're just going to see how it goes. Normally you can grow here through the winter, but the problem is going to be getting germination. Some of these seeds need a little bit higher temperature to germinate quickly than what we're probably going to be having throughout November. But we're going to try it anyway, because that's what we do here. This is a teaching garden, and I want to do things for your benefit as well. So thank you to my commenters who suggested companion plants for my garden. My garlic is over here and over here, and we ran out and couldn't fill the middle. So I plugged in a couple of dill plants. Got to have dill. Fresh dill is, oh, it's unbeatable. So thank you. I did want to show you my pawpaw tree. I'm not supposed to grow these. I'm not supposed to be able to grow these in my zone. These are like a zone 7 and above, maybe zone 8 and above. But I've learned how to manipulate the zone enough where I can keep this in the cooler side of my yard. I can keep it kind of in the shade. I've put it out here so it can start getting some sun, and we can see if we can transition this to a full sun plant. Normally a pawpaw tree is an understory plant in the forest. It grows on edges and borders, and it grows in the understory until the covering trees, like your hickories and oaks and whatever, till they get old enough and die off and start losing branches. Then these guys will shoot up between when they're mature. Here's my very sickly looking not a perennial plant. This is a 3-year-old plant. I have fertilized it, but it's just not responding. I think it's done. It's starting to give up. I do see some new growth coming out there. Check out my oranges. This is a Kishu Mandarin, I think. No, this is an Owari Satsuma. Yeah, Owari Satsuma. And I tried one today on the advice of one of my channel subscribers who commented that these can be eaten at this point where there's still some green on them. Well, they tasted like oranges, but they weren't very sweet, so I think they need to mature a little bit longer. So we've got some, herbs coming in because it's nice and warm here. Some basil hiding back there. And, yeah, but for the most part, most of my plants in pots are showing they're suffering from the freeze. You can see new growth coming out here, but there's some old growth that needs to be trimmed away. Citrus doing fine. I got my key lime over here. This little dude took a big hit, and I chopped him off after the freeze down here. This fig tree has put on all this growth this year, but it's suffering from fig rust, which is a common problem around here. Once you get the fig rust, I think it's a fungus. Certain varieties are susceptible to it, while certain varieties right next to them are not. Celeste and whatever this is are this is a yellow long neck. They are susceptible to that. Nothing you can do about it once it's in the area. All the Celeste fig trees in our area have succumbed to the rust. There's my key lime on my key lime tree. But yeah, most of this stuff was left outside and suffered for it. Here's what's going on in my little side bed. My Mizuna from the spring has come back, and this is a good Asian green. I've got some bok choy here ready to go in a stir fry. Tons and tons of herbs over here. I've got some marjoram. I think that's that's purple thyme. It's purple oregano, rosemary, some thyme, and I don't remember what that is. That's probably the marjoram. And those are my spring onions. I've still got spring onions going, and these are very good to cook with, just green onions. And so this little bed has been a real good success for me this year. This is the pot, the container from which I harvested a good amount of sweet potatoes this year, and they had filled that thing up quite nicely. You can see I've still got some in a pot over here, and they're still flowering, so yeah, gonna have to wait on those. As the cooler weather arrives, most of my pepper plants, and I think you probably have experienced this too, they'll still produce. I've harvested this recently, but the peppers and the chilies will be much smaller. This is a cayenne, and normally I get 3 or 4 inch fruits like that big on them, but now they're just little stumpy little fellas. That's okay. This has been a very good producer for me. That is called Red Flame. It is a hybrid from Johnny's Select Seeds. Good plant. Thanks for liking our channel and subscribing. Thanks for following us on Instagram and Facebook. If you like our content, I invite you to subscribe and become part of our community down in the comment section. Leave your questions, leave comments, whatever it may be. If you leave me a good question, you may even find yourself on a gardening question and answer. I've got an episode of Q&A coming up fairly soon. But for now, we're just planting things. I got to get busy in this garden. So, hey, thank you. Have a good day. I hope your November is as uneventful as it can be. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.